Hi, Hamburg. So nice to be here. It's such a nice coincidence that I'm here because I just didn't expect a meetup to happen, especially one about HTML. I didn't know that anyone cares about HTML, so that there's even a meetup. But it's really nice, and I get to meet a lot of online friends, which is really, really cool. And I get to meet Vadim again because we have a history. Like my first international talk, I didn't give many, but my first one was in St. Petersburg at his conference. Peter CSS, like the first English-speaking front-end, no, the first English-speaking web development conference, even, or front-end? Okay, CSS conference in Russia. Yeah, so thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for organizing, and it's like I'm really happy to be here. My name is Manuel Matuzovic. I'm a front-end developer from Austria. Usually I say Vienna, but I moved to Graz, and I don't know if anyone knows Graz is like the second largest city in Austria, but it's like super small compared to Hamburg or Vienna. So yeah, I'm from Austria, and I'm here because one of my clients is here in Hamburg, and they invited me to help them with accessibility on their products. So I spent the last 2 days with an agency here in Hamburg, and I pretty much, looked at the product and I tore it apart. That's what I do. And then I said, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And this is how you fix it. And your users will benefit in this or that way if we improve those things that I told you. That's what I did. And yeah, that's what I do for a living. Like I'm a freelancer, I do consulting, I do workshops in-house or online, or also on Smashing Magazine. I have a brand new workshop with Smashing Magazine starting in November about modern CSS. So if you want to learn about the new fancy stuff in CSS, you know where you can find that. Yes, and I also write HTML and CSS for a living, and sometimes even JavaScript if it makes sense for the user. And especially the last year or so, I wrote a lot of JavaScript because with one of my clients, we decided to port their native HTML, CSS, JavaScript frontend to web components. And we did that because I was in a meeting with a group of developers who were supposed to use our pattern library that we built with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, native. And they told us they can't use it. And I was really confused because in my mind, we picked the most universal, the most compatible language possible, HTML. Because if any product, like any framework-based or content management-based website or web app has in common, it's that they have some kind of HTML or something that looks like HTML, JSX, input, and they have HTML output. So they should be able to work with HTML. But they told me, yeah, I mean, we could use it, but we would have to write a wrapper component in React for all of your components that you've written so that we can make it dynamic and make it work with React. And my initial thought was, and I didn't speak that out loud, I was like, yeah, I mean, then, just don't use React and live a happier life. I mean, that's what you do. But yeah, no, I'm a reasonable man, so I kept listening. And at some point, I realized that I actually felt their pain because we built those components using Eleventy. Eleventy is a static site generator, and it takes different kinds of input, like, for example, nunchucks or liquid or even JSX. So you can decide how your input looks like, and in the end, you get HTML, which is great because the best possible thing your user can get is pure HTML without any server stuff, any client rendered stuff. I mean, you can add JS if you want to, but it's just HTML. And if we build a website with Eleventy and we build a couple of those, we're extremely efficient. Like I can build a website in a couple of hours and it's accessible, it looks super fine, and it has search built-in and all kinds of things because we built this very robust setup. But then we built a website using Craft CMS. Does anyone know Craft CMS? Yeah, it's a yeah, it's a PHP-based content management system that uses Twig, and Twig is very similar to Nunchuck. It's also Ginger 2 based, as far as I know. So it wasn't that hard to use our components with Twig, but we also had to write wrapper components in order to make the stuff we built in HTML reusable. Makes sense, right? And talking to those developers, I realized, oh, shit, we have a problem here because now we have React. They need reusability. And then maybe next week, someone will tell me they're using Vue and they want to use our components. So then they would have to write wrapper components. And then we have, I don't know, God forbid, Angular. And then they would have to write wrapper components. So I said, okay, tell me, what should we do? And then someone said, well, we could use web components. And I was like, Yeah, no, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I have absolutely no idea. I know that web components exist, but I didn't have any deep knowledge about web components. So I wasn't able to give a professional advice. So I said, you know what, give me a couple of days. I will do some research. We meet again, and then we decide. And they said, okay. So I did. I did some research. I also asked some much smarter friends. I had like a catalog of questions, and I asked them, okay, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do this? And so on. And then we went again, and then we said, okay, let's do it. We are going to use web components. It makes sense. It's a smart choice, I believe. Let's invest a lot of money. And yeah, so the last year I spent just rewriting everything in web components. And at this point, I actually decided to talk about accessibility, to tell you about all the things that I learned about accessibility when I wrote web components, a lot of web components. But on my way here, I was in the train for 12 hours, so I had a lot of time, and I did what any sane person would do. I thought about web components, and I decided that, yeah, I don't want to talk about accessibility because I already gave this talk a couple of days ago at ID24 online. It's recorded, it's on YouTube. I've written a version of it. Like, if you want to know how to build accessible web components, you can access it. You can read it, you can listen to it, you can watch it. It's all there. And during this train ride, I thought about this meeting, and I tried to understand why I didn't know anything about web components, because I'm building websites. Like, I built the first website 23 years ago, and I never even considered building using web components. I never tried it. I don't care about it. Like, and I thought, why? Because I'm really curious. Like, I try all the things. Like, I tried Angular, I tried Vue, I tried React, and also, I don't know, Kirby CMS recently. So I really don't care about the technology. I just want to learn and to see what things can do for me. But I never really cared about web components. How many of you have used web components or used them maybe even? Okay, some of you. So I tried to figure that out, and I came up with a couple of reasons why. There are probably many reasons, and I believe that some of the reasons that I came up with will also apply to some of you or to some other people. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to do instead. I will try to talk about those reasons, and then I will show you how, and that's the new title of the talk, okay, that's the old title. I changed in the dev tool, so I did a refresh, sorry. And I will show you how web components are for everyone, because, okay, we'll talk about that later. I will show you how web components are really useful. And that's what we'll do. Just two side notes. I'm not a professional web component programmer, whatever. Like, I'm a beginner. So I will probably make mistakes. I will probably say stuff that's not true, but I don't care. Like, this is a safe space, not a conference. This is a meetup. So if something goes wrong, you just tell me. Like, if you know more than I do, just tell me, no, that's not right. That's fine. And the second thing is, I don't know much about the history of web components, and some of the stuff I will talk about refers to historical events that might or might not have happened. I didn't have time to research because, like, yeah, I finished the talk 30 minutes ago. So yeah, a lot of the things I will say are based on assumptions, which is really smart. Okay, so before we talk about that stuff, let me quickly explain what web components are, because there's no point of talking about web components if you're not on the same page. And I will talk about like 10 minutes about what web components are, because I believe they're really good, and I want you to know about them, and I want you to try them out maybe tomorrow or tonight. So what are web components? Web components are a set of web APIs that you can use to build your own fully featured HTML elements. So you have a bunch of APIs, and those allow you to create your own HTML elements. So you can see, even though this will be a lot about JavaScript, we're talking about HTML, so you can invent your own HTML elements. And some of you are thinking, I mean, I can invent my own HTML elements right now. I don't need JavaScript for that. So if you want a Star Wars element, you just write Star Wars, start tag, end tag, and you can use it. You can even select it in CSS. There are some rules that you have to follow when it comes to the design of your tag name. So there has to be a dash in order for it to be valid HTML, because if you're not using a dash, then it might think it's a native HTML element. So to distinguish your custom element from a native element, you need a dash. And if you do that, that's valid HTML. You select it in CSS, set display block, 4 pixel solid blue outline, some padding, and you get that. It's pretty much a div, a very dumb element. Like, it doesn't do much, but yeah, now it's called Star Wars. You can do that. But the element you see here is a so-called undefined element. So the HTML parser in the browser doesn't know much about this element, just knows, okay, there is some made up start and end tag, and I will apply styling to it, it's fine, but you can't do much with it. And the whole point about web components is that using the custom elements API, you can define these elements. You can tell the parser, hey, I'm inventing an element, and that's what it is, and that's what it can do. And in order to do that, you write a class. I'm just calling it Star Wars. You can come up with anything you want. And then using the custom elements API, which is built into the browser, so no external JavaScript framework or anything, you can define your own tag, and then you just pass the constructor function, the class. This looks scary. Like, I'm not a JavaScript person. I mean, I write JavaScript every day, but I really don't want to be associated with that community. And also, I don't know much about JavaScript. Yeah, it's strange. And I also don't know much about JavaScript. I can use it. Like, I can write JavaScript stuff, but I'm not like, I can't tell you what this does in certain contexts. I can just use it. If it doesn't work, I will Google it. So I don't know what classes do, but it looks cool. So you just create your class, you pass it, and then you've defined your elements. It still looks the same, so it doesn't change anything. But the cool thing is now that you get certain things that you can do. For example, you get lifecycle methods. So there's this connected callback function, and it runs whenever your component gets added to the page. Or there's disconnected callback, which runs when you remove it from the page, which is useful for attaching and removing event listeners, for example. Or there's an attribute change callback, which runs every time you change an attribute. So you can also not just come up with your own elements, but also with attributes. And if an attribute value changes, you get the name of the attribute, the old value and the new value, and you can do something with it. So pretty cool. So if we try to improve our Star Wars component, you can remove the content, and instead of passing Luke Skywalker, you can come up with the character attribute here and pass Luke. And then you could call the attribute change callback and fetch the Star Wars API, which is absolutely a thing. There is a Star Wars API. By the way, I'm not a fan. I don't care about Star Wars. It was just the first best thing that I found. So I was like, okay, I will take Star Wars. So there's this character, Luke Skywalker. And if you want to fetch the data about him, just pass Luke. And then I connect to the Star Wars API. And then I get his full name, the hair color, which is blonde, and the eye color, which is blue. And if I open DevTools in my custom element that I completely made up, then I can, I don't know, change character to Jar. And then it will give me Jar Jar Binks, hair color none, of course, and eye color orange. So you can see that the attribute change callback function now reacts to changes to the attribute. So useful stuff. Yeah, at least it can be useful. So that's the first API, and that's the most important API, the custom elements API, which allows you to define elements where you can do stuff. The next API is Shadow DOM. This is optional. This is optional. This is really important. You can use it if you want to. And this API allows you to attach a small Shadow DOM tree to your custom elements. Does everyone know what a DOM tree is? Okay, okay, cool. So let me quickly explain what it is. My explanation is probably not 100% accurate, but in the context of this meetup, it's absolutely fine. It's really okay. So when you create an HTML element, you write special characters, angle brackets and text, and it's just a text file. But then you open it in the browser, and the browser has the HTML parser and parses it, and the browser says, oh, I understand that, I know what it is. So it creates a tree-like representation of your document, which is the DOM tree. And this consists of all the nodes on your page and child nodes and relationships and certain properties. That's the DOM tree. And this is a representation of the whole document. So all the HTML in your document is in this tree. And then using JavaScript, you can fetch data from it. For example, you can run document tree select all and find all buttons. And then you can find all the buttons in the tree and so on. Or you can change class names and, just JavaScript stuff. And Shadow DOM now allows you to create smaller trees for certain elements. So you don't attach something to the large tree, but to specific nodes. And the important thing here, or the superpower of Shadow DOM, is that nodes in shadow trees are encapsulated. So they're kind of hidden from the rest. I will show you what that means. Here's a simple button. Like the button, the component that I just showed here is the button component. And all I do is I create an element called button and add some content. And it looks like a button, and it also works like a button. It's absolutely fine. And if you inspect it, you will see now there is this shadow root node where you can see the button is in the shadow. It's in the shadow tree. It's not in the big tree. It's in this smaller tree. Let's say we have 3 buttons on the page, and then we have our custom button, the button, which includes a native button, but in the shadow DOM. And we run document query selector all. So give me all the buttons and tell me how many are there on the page. Now, you might think it will return 4 because there are 4 buttons on the page, but it gives you 3. Why? Because the one button in the shadow root is encapsulated. So it's hidden from the rest. Or another way to visualize that, if we select all the buttons on the page in the document and we say every button gets a 4-pixel solid border, then it only affects the first 3 buttons, not the last one, because it's not just the DOM is encapsulated, but also styling. So the styling that you do on the document, on the page, doesn't affect the nodes in shadow trees. And this can be really useful. Like that can absolutely make sense. Sometimes, in rare cases. I wrote a blog post called The Pros and Cons of Using Shadow DOM and Style Encapsulation. There are 3 pros and 11 cons. Yeah. But, I mean, I assume that most of you don't know me. I'm an accessibility person. Like, I care a lot about progressive enhancement. I really only use JavaScript when you need it and want to create accessible, fast websites. And some of the stuff messes with many of the things that I believe in. So, but it has its place. It's fine. It can make sense, but not. It's not for everyone. The next API is just the fact that you can export a class and then you can import it as a module. This is just a side note, but it's just, you know, it can make sense. It can be useful. And the next thing is HTML templates. Who knows about the templates tag in HTML? Who knows this tag and what it does? Okay. Not even the half. Cool. The templates tag allows you to write HTML to your document, but it won't be rendered. So you write the HTML and you don't see it in the viewport. And the nice thing is you can use it in JavaScript. So instead of having to write document create element UL, document create element LI, UL append child LI, and so on, you know, instead of having to write all this JavaScript stuff, you can just write the HTML that you need for your JavaScript component. Put it in a template tag, it won't be rendered on the page. And then in your JavaScript, you can fetch the content from the template and just append it to your component. It's just a nicer way of writing HTML for JavaScript. So you're not writing it in JavaScript, but in an HTML document. And this is really useful. Yes, and then there's a thing called element internals, which allows you to create form-associated custom elements. So when you create a custom element, it's just nothing, like it's a generic element, like a div. Now imagine you have a component called the input or my input, whatever, and you put it in a form. The form doesn't really know anything about this component. So if you try to use a label element on the input component, it doesn't work because the label can only labelable elements. I think that's a word, I'm not sure, which means button, text area, input, select, meter, progress. Did I miss anything? Yeah, and form associated elements. So the elements internals API allows you to make custom elements form associated. So it's something like a form, and then you have access to stuff like the labels that are attached to an element. Pretty new, doesn't work in every browser, but can be really useful. Okay, that's that. And now, I told you that in the train I was thinking, and I thought, okay, why didn't I ever try web components? The first reason is browser support. For some reason, in my mind, I always remembered, okay, it could be cool to use web components, but browser support is really, really bad. And that's not true anymore, at least. So IE11, I hope that most of you don't have to care about it. Yesterday, I talked to someone and they said, yeah, but you know, the people who build our component library, they also have to support IE8, so we can't do that. Yeah. Obviously not in Europe, but still IE8 is a thing for this component library. That's why the whole website is built using tables for some reason. I don't know. I can show you, if you want to, I can show you the website. It's pretty fantastic. Yeah, but other than that, you can see it works in every browser. But you see this, there's something fishy in Safari. And there are just two things that don't work in certain browsers that would be really cool. And for some people, those things are deal breakers, but they aren't for me. But like, you can still use web components, but you can't use those really cool things. That would be nice. But yeah, they're not mandatory for building web components. The first one is built-in custom elements. So usually when you create a custom element, you extend, when you write the class, you extend from the HTML element DOM interface. It sounds like I'm really smart, I have no idea what it is, but this is basically just the basic information that every element shares. So you're creating a very basic element. But you can also say, okay, no, I'm creating a custom component that extends from the HTML button element DOM interface. So it builds up on the button element. So you can use the button element and everything it does and can do, and all the semantic information it provides, and then you add extra superpowers to the button. So you can just use button and then say is enhanced button or whatever the name of your component is. This is really cool. Safari doesn't support it. They have no plans on supporting it ever. So forget about it, I guess. I mean, if you create products that only work for Chrome, which is quite happens quite often. So if you have a product that only works in a specific browser, then you could do that. It's fine. And the second thing is, I'm really not well prepared. Let's see. Okay, it doesn't matter. The second thing is the Clarity Shadow DOM, which allows you to attach the Shadow DOM that I talked about, not on the client side, but on the server. So you could make Shadow DOM components without JavaScript, which would be really cool, but Firefox doesn't support it. There is a polyfill, which doesn't really polyfill it, it just enables them using JavaScript again in Firefox, so that should be good enough. But other than that, it's fine. Okay, so browser support doesn't really matter, so it's fine, you can use them. The second reason is, whenever I read about Shadow DOM, about web components, I always read that Shadow DOM is the best thing. Like the USP of web components is style encapsulation and DOM encapsulation. You really need that and you really want that. That's why we're using web components. If you read MDN, the first sentence is something encapsulation, and this is why web components are so cool. If you use Lit, which is a framework for web components, they will tell you, please don't disable Shadow DOM. You really need that. And most articles will tell you Shadow DOM is mandatory, or not mandatory, but you should use it because it makes sense. I have a friend called Egor, and he works for the Dutch government, as far as I know, or builds website for the Dutch government, and he builds web components that will be used by a lot of different departments with a lot of different technologies and styling. He doesn't know where his components will end up. Like, he has absolutely no idea. In this case, Shadow DOM makes sense, of course. So he doesn't know where his components will end up. So he makes sure that if you just use one component, you throw it anywhere, it will work standalone. It will look exactly like he planned to. He may give developers some hooks to style it, but generally it will just function and work. So this is where Shadow DOM is really great, because you encapsulate DOM and styling is fine. But for someone like me, who usually doesn't build websites based on some JavaScript stuff, or who also actually likes the cascade and inheritance in CSS and likes global styling, where it makes sense to use global styling, and someone who doesn't want to repeat certain things specifically for components, Shadow DOM can be a barrier. Yeah, and after working a year on web components, I realized Shadow DOM shouldn't be the default. It should be the other way. So you don't start with Shadow DOM, but if it makes sense to use it, you use it. Otherwise, you're better off not using Shadow DOM, because it's easier to work with global styles and so on. You can read it in my article. And the third reason was, this sounds a lot like you are living in a JavaScript world. Like, this is absolutely 100% JavaScript ecosystem. So you are building applications, web apps, whatever. You need to know a lot about JavaScript. And this is also not true. And this is why the talk of this, the title of this talk is Web Components Are for Everyone, because I realized that even if you're building static websites or using WordPress or typo-free, I'm so sorry if you have to do that, or Drupal, or pretty much anything, it can make sense to use web components, because the superpower of web components is that they're reusable. So you build it once, and then you can use it in all kinds of different systems. Like they solve the React problem for us. I built those, we're using them in Craft, we're using them in Levity now, and in React. And they don't have to rebuild wrapper components, because the web components are already the wrapper that they can just use. Okay. It's very likely that I forgot something, but we will see. Now I want to quickly give you a demo of how to build a web component. I will keep it very simple, and I will also, and the emphasis here is on the fact that it works without JavaScript and that it makes sense without JavaScript, and the reusability. So what I want to do here, I want to rebuild this. This is the details element, details and summary, like this super simple native disclosure widget. You could just use HTML for that because it's built into the browser, it works, but it doesn't work that well. So let me just quickly find that. This is my incredibly beautiful website. Yeah, okay. There's a blog post called Details Summary Inconsistencies, where I tested the details summary element with different screen readers and browsers for the book that I'm writing for O'Reilly, which comes out next year in September. And yeah, the thing is with details, generally it works, but the stuff that the screen reader will announce, by the way, a screen reader is a software that reads content on a page, usually used by blind people. The stuff that it announces is very different. So for example, in some browser on Firefox, it will say right pointing triangle, show more collapsed summary group, which is a lot of information, and other times we'll just get show more, which is maybe not enough information, because you want to know, is it open or is it closed, and so on. So there are a lot of inconsistencies. So if you're into consistency, you need consistency. You don't want to, just confront users with the issues that they might be with the details and summary elements. Then you might want to build your own disclosure widget, and this is what we are going to do now. So let's see. Okay. No. Yeah. This is my HTML document, nothing too fancy here, just the details and summary elements, and we want to build that from scratch using web components. And I took some notes, but they're not here. Let's see how that goes. Okay. Just that you know what I prepared. I have a styles CSS file. There's just some basic styling here, just a blue text color, sans serif fonts, and I removed some marginal paddings. And there's an empty JavaScript file. That's all we have. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to create my custom element. So I'm calling it the disclosure, and I'm passing some content to the element. That's the first thing we do. And that's what we get. So this is an undefined element because we're not using JavaScript yet. And it will just show the content. And we can actually prove that it's undefined because there's a defined pseudo class in CSS that you can use. Or you can negate it and just say, if the disclosure, so my custom component is not defined, then show a border. So this will tell me this component is not defined. I completely made it up, but there is no JavaScript that registers it. So let's do that. So we'll move here, and I will just say, please create a constructor class. This is all you need generally, and then you have to define it. So I say the name of my component is the disclosure. This is the constructor class I'm using. I'm saving that, and the red border is gone because now it's defined. This is now a defined element, and we can keep working. I need my notes. I forgot what step 5 is. Just a second. It's okay. So now it's defined, and now we want to add some functionality. I think I know what step 5 is. The first thing is we want to attach a shadow tree, because in this component I want to show you how the light DOM, this is the opposite of the shadow DOM, and shadow DOM can work really well together. Like it can make sense to do both. Again, most websites and articles will tell you, don't do that, don't use the light DOM, put everything in shadow DOM. But I'm saying no, it can be really smart to do that. So this is how you attach a shadow DOM. And now the text is gone because now we have a shadow DOM and the component doesn't care anymore about the stuff that I'm passing through the light DOM. It only cares about the shadow DOM. So it wants to render the shadow DOM, but the shadow DOM is empty. So what I could do here is I could just, write document, create elements, button, whatever, this shadow root attach element, and I can just keep attaching elements to the shadow root. But what I really want to do is I want to pass content to these components like this and render it. And for that, we need a slot element. Who of you knows about the slot element? Okay, why? Vue probably, or other frameworks. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So we're creating a template. It's not rendered on the page, but we're going to use it in our component. And this is what allows us to take that content that we pass from light DOM and display it in the shadow DOM of our component. Okay, now we have a template, and now we need to take this HTML and use it in our component. So I did that because I'm really bad at typing. Like it would be horrible to watch me typing. So that's why I invested like 2 hours in creating those snippets. So what am I doing here? I'm referencing the template, I'm taking the template content, I'm loading it and attaching it to the shadow root. And of course, I have to call this. Now we have the exact same thing like we did earlier. Why would you do that? I mean, now I'm increasing the complexity of my component here. Like, it looks exactly like it did earlier. But the cool thing is now we can now add functionality. We can now actually turn this into a disclosure widget and only add the functionality that we want in JavaScript. So what do we need to create a disclosure widget? We need a button. So I'm going to add a button here in my template. I'm setting array expanded false. The array expanded attribute tells the browser if the thing that this button controls, so this div, is visible or not. So by default, I'm saying false because it's hidden by default. And then we're going to change that. Of course, I have to hide it. So I'll just put the hidden attribute here. Hidden is just an attribute in HTML, like the display none equivalent in HTML. Okay, content hidden, we show a button, and now I want to attach some functionality to the button. Oh no, before that, I want to change the styling of the button. I want to show you something because let's say I want to remove the styling of the button completely. I don't want it to look like a button. And I select it and I say all unset. It doesn't work because style is encapsulated. The button doesn't live in a document, it lives in the shadow DOM. So this won't work. What I would have to do now is here I could just run document create element style and then add CSS via JavaScript to the style element. But you can do that. And actually I would do it here. But just for the sake of readability, we'll just do this. So I will just add a style element here. And I think I prepared that. Let's see. Yeah, so we'll just add a style element here. And hide the button. Yeah, okay. So now the button styles are gone. I'm setting this block, and then I'm also saying if the ARIA attributes, ARIA expanded attribute on the button changes, then please show the content of the page. And now we need the button functionality. So no, sorry. Okay, so what am I doing? I'm saying please give me the button that we got from the template, get the RA-expanded attribute, the event listener, and then just copy the attribute. So every time the RA-expanded attribute changes, the visibility of the div changes, because I said that in CSS. And yeah, live coding is always not like the best idea, but you will see like what the result will be. And I should probably also plug in my computer. So the content is hidden now. We are toggling the ARIA expanded attributes on the button, and then our CSS just makes sure that our content is visible when you click it. Okay, let me quickly check. So, okay, yeah. So you can see it in DevTools, the ARIA expanded attribute changes, and I'm showing and hiding the content here. So this works. I mean, you could do that without a web component in JavaScript because it's not magic. It's like super simple JavaScript actually. But the nice thing is you can just reuse this. So you write this class once, everywhere you include it, you can just reuse the thing. And there are some additional things that allow you to tweak this because like we just recreated the details and summary elements. But can you give an example where else you would use this exact pattern? So you have a button with ARIA expanded, and then you show and hide some content. Where else would you use it? Menu. Yeah. So when you have something like this, so you have a parent element, you click, you open the navigation. This is actually super simple. It's just a button, ARIA expanded, true or false, you hide and show content. You don't need any role, menu item, whatever stuff. It's like a really simple pattern. But you meant something else, right? Hamburg. Yes. So see how I can read your mind. So this is the same thing. This is like just a burger button. It has other. Oh. This is pretty much the same thing. This is just a button, but in this case, it doesn't show text, it shows a button. But it's pretty much the same thing. So I picked this component because it's fairly simple and it's something that you will very likely need on your website. So just to show you how reusable it can be. So if you visit the Factorial website and I just copy my, oh, no, don't worry. I'm not going to do what I get paid for usually. So if we just copy our button, yeah. So I will copy that. I just paste it here. You can see it just shows the text because it's undefined. So, and it doesn't show the button. This is just a really nice way of progressively enhancing because there's no point in showing a button if you can't click it. But in this case, there is no button because there's no JavaScript. So, and if I add my JavaScript, can I do that? Yeah, probably. Okay. Yeah. Now I just ran the JavaScript and you can see it's a disclosure widget and it looks like it belongs to the Factorial website because it inherits the styles from the button, inherits the styles from the rest of the document, and the content within also inherits the style because it's in the light DOM, like it's in the document, it's part of the document, so it just takes all the styles. So if you put this in any other website, it will just look like it should. And yeah, I'm going to stop here because I realized it's yeah, if you usually don't do live coding, it's not a great idea. But if you want to improve this, you could also, you know, just make up custom attributes and say, okay, you can pass the label, so it's not just hard coded in a component, so you can pick it. That's also yeah, pretty easy to do. Or you can add a icon attribute that allows you to pick a specific icon that should be displayed instead of the text. And it's just a really nice thing. And you can see here, does your website work without JavaScript? So should we try? Not bad. So One of 10 websites in Germany. So if my component was still there because it, edited manually, it would just show the lorem ipsum text without the button because it works without JavaScript. And yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. Like the message of this talk is web components are for everyone. They can make sense for you. So if you have stuff that you write for every website that you build with WordPress or any custom any content management system that you just keep repeating all the time, it could make sense to create a web component. And I forgot one thing that I just want to show you. This one. So if you want to style the button, you can't. Like you have to put all the styling in the shadow DOM, but you can make it accessible to the outside. So you can say, I'm turning this button into a part, I'm turning this content into a part. And then you can do this. You can say the disclosure part button. And then you can add styling to the button. So this gives you access to an element inside the shadow DOM, so you can style it from the outside. So even more control. So if you don't want to your disclosure widget to look like it did, like I built it, you can turn it into a button or whatever you want. So you have access to that. If you want to the content not just be a simple div, but you want it to turn it into a flyout navigation, you can just do it by applying global styles. And the component itself doesn't have to change. Yes?
I think you would do that in the other style sheet. Because this is the style sheet of the component.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, of course. It doesn't, yeah, thank you. It doesn't happen in this style sheet, but in the global style sheet. So yeah, the point is you can use it in a global style sheet. Thank you. That's it. Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry, it was a lot of JavaScript for an HTML meetup and talk. But the point was you can create your own custom HTML elements. And like the message is really, this is not about JavaScript necessarily. Like you can apply progressive enhancement using using web components. It's actually built into the whole thing. If you don't default to Shadow DOM, but you use just Light DOM or a combination of Light DOM and Shadow DOM. Thanks. That's it. Any questions about web components? I know it was a bit, confusing, but I thought it would be smarter to talk about that than about general accessibility topic, because I feel that web components deserve a much, much better place or bigger place in our hearts and in our websites. Anything that you want to ask? Yes.
Have you ever thought about it or tried it to include external style sheets from your web component so you don't have to write it inside of your component? Like external style sheet.
Yes.
Real style sheet.
Yeah. You can do that, but the problem can be that you get a flash of unstyled content, because it might happen that the style sheet needs longer to load than the components. So it would just display the HTML, but not the styling for it.
But yeah, you can do that. Opacity 0, super plus fine. But yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's also one of the reasons I don't like Shadow DOM is that you get a lot of flash of unstyled content, because if you do that, what I just did, you have HTML on your page, JavaScript didn't kick in, so you see something, then JavaScript kicks in, and then it looks differently. This is one of the reasons why Shadow DOM, can be a problem when you try to build something that also works on the server. But we're soon launching the first website using web components. Actually, it soft launched yesterday, I think, and it will soon be online. I will share it probably maybe on my blog. Just to show you that it's possible to build something using web components. It's also accessible and works without JavaScript. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't include all the information, but most of it, important stuff. So you get the most important information, even if JavaScript is turned off.
So it makes sense mixing up pure HTML and web components, because some of the HTML elements are already fine, like the mid layer, and probably you use the details element because it's not very accessible. So you put your own web component to make it more accessible, mix up the vanilla HTML, I said so, with the web component.
If I understood correctly, that's something that Zach Letterman. I forgot about Zach. That's something that he did. Um, if you want to know the story, ask me later. Yeah. Do you mean something like that? So it built this details utils element where it wraps the details element and it adds functionality to it. Do you mean something
My
like that?
question was using both web components and pure HTML tags. The best of web component or the best of HTML? Many of HTML themselves are like.
Oh, yeah. So for me, the way I use them and the way we think about them, they're just an addition. So we start with HTML, everything is just HTML. And if you want to improve an element or add functionality, we just wrap it in a web component. So everything happens in the document, we pass content to a web component, it just wraps the actual HTML. Yeah. And adds functionality like it did here. So we start with the paragraph, that's our content. And then the web component just says, okay, hide it by default, add a button and make it toggleable. I don't know if that's a word. Yeah, absolutely. And also, we have a really strong global style sheet that works with just HTML, no classes. So if you just write a certain structure, like you start with a header, a main, footer, then you have headings, sections, it would just look perfectly fine. It just really looks like the design should look. And there are just some minor differences, and then you wrap it in web components, and then it's perfect.
It's sort of a lightweight way of doing this, because if you look at a typical website made by Google using web components, like YouTube, for example, the only tags they use are web components. So it's like web components are all the way down. Like it's hard to find a paragraph or a link in there. Maybe some links, maybe some features, but still.
Oh, okay.
But in your case, it's just you're spicing up the regular,
exactly.
regular HTML with something else.
Yeah. There are at least two rules that we follow. Like with the client is the city of Vienna. I used to work for the city of Vienna for 4 years. And there were at least two rules that we follow. The first one is progressive enhancement. So you start layer by layer, HTML, then CSS, then JavaScript. If JavaScript doesn't work for some reason, CSS will work. If CSS doesn't work for some reason, the HTML is fine. And the other one is the rule of least power. So we try to always pick the weakest possible solution and language for a certain problem. So if we can build it in HTML, we will use HTML. If it's super interactive, like highly reactive and so on, then we will use some kind of JavaScript thing, like maybe React if it makes sense, or maybe some other stuff, maybe Svelte, maybe something that makes it possible to really make stuff reactive. In our case, we're not using, I just showed you native web components. There's a framework called Lit by Google that improves the developer experience and also adds reactivity. We use that. It's an extra, like, I think 6 kilobytes, but we can afford it. And it just makes them even more reactive and even better and easier to use. But it's always HTML first.
And there's a nice new element, it's called pop over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not very well supported. Pop over, yeah. It's an attribute. That's an element. And
Attribute.
The browsers don't know the pop over element. You can use this as a web component to get work. Might just be a way to get a new element which the browser don't know to make work.
Yeah, could be. I mean, in the end, it's just a polyfill. It doesn't matter if you write it in JavaScript or in a web component JavaScript, doesn't really matter. But yeah, that would be for a grace period until all the browsers support it. You could use that, and then when it's supported, you just throw it away, like the wrapper component, and then it just works.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, but I think Sarah's right. It's just an attribute as far as I know, not an element.
Maybe it's select menu. Maybe it's like select menu.
Oh, select menu could be also a great example. Yeah. I wouldn't want to write that. Anything else? Did I get anything completely wrong? Were the web components pros, JavaScript pros? No? Okay, cool. Then, yeah, thanks so much for listening, and let's have a drink later on. And I'm really looking forward to Vadim's talk and also Sarah's talk, and I forgot your name, but I'm also looking forward to yours, Simon. Thank you.